Thanks very much. Right, Serene, sorry, my geography's bad today, so over to you. Let's. Where are you joining from? What's your background?
No problem, thanks. Yeah, so my name is Serene Fall, from Senegal, currently also based in Senegal. So I have a bit of experience, a bit around. So I've done like engineering from management consulting, and then ended up in research around 7-8 years ago now. Not as experienced as Karin, but still somewhere around there. And yeah, so co-founder of LOOKA, which is pretty much research tech startup based in Senegal, where we help pretty much bridge the gap between organizations and African consumers. So yeah, we are actually a spin-off of an agency, a design agency called UX Design, which started out back in 2016 as one of their products that they were trying to scale to help make market research a bit more accessible in Africa. So we started out doing a lot of more like typical surveys, offline, online, and recruitment for qualitative research, and now are now scaling more products such as like our data hub and our AI moderated interviewer, just still in the same vision of making market research accessible to all.
You have pivoted the entire business effectively. You started as an agency, you ran with parallel within a sort of agency built product, and then divested the agency, focused and built a product focused business.
Yeah.
So Serene, can you tell us a bit more about your story on the tech side of things? Because you had UX Design, more of a kind of like design product UX research agency, and then you built the LOOKA product. What led to that?
Yeah. So me and my two co-founders were working at UX Design at that point. And one of the things that we had realized was that operations was just a pain at every project. Like something as simple as just like recruiting 5 people would take so much time. People would have like so many issues because you don't really have a lot of ops experts per se. And especially what happens is when you're working in the African market, it's very fragmented, very diverse markets within. So you have like 15 to 54 different markets with each of their own realities. So as an agency, and what we have seen widespread is, it's very hard to have that internal capacity for yourself, because you need to be kind of like in a vertical and horizontal way, very widespread, which is kind of hard to do on your own. So then that's when we figured out that there was a gap of, okay, we can maybe try to see how we can use tech to handle that issue, which at the beginning was an internal thing just for the agency. And then as we started working on it, we thought about the fact, okay, maybe this is something that other people are facing. It could be agencies, it could be companies. And that's when we kind of like started externalizing the service, still as more of like an agency building the tech. And then at some point is when we realize, okay, you can be an optimized agency to a certain extent, but at some point you have to kind of like make the full pivot. And so that's at that point is when we realized, okay, we need to have like a very specific team with a very different set of skill sets to kind of like be able to work on the tech and research aspect of it and see, okay, how can we now become a research ops tool to now help people just focus, narrow down the focus really to just that aspect of it, really like clutch out all the other aspects and try to be as efficient as possible. And that's kind of like the story of how LOOKA Research came up together. And then now we just realized, okay, you started working on one specific product, which is just for the surveys, and then realize, okay, we can actually have a set of different products and become like this end-to-end toolkit to be able to handle your research operations across the continent.
Yeah, fascinating. You said something there which I think is an hour-long discussion in itself, which is 54 countries. I guess the kind of variety and the differences that you have to deal with is quite a layer of complexity there as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much like you realize that you can't have like you can have a one-stop shop framework of how to go about things, but then when you get into the deep of each country, you have to pretty much have to be flexible enough to adapt to all of them. And for that, you really need to really be just focused on handling that part of it to really actually be optimized and efficient to handle the different markets at the same time.
Yeah. So tell us the components of LOOKA. It's surveys, it's recruitment for participants, effectively, making that whole research ops layer much more straightforward. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So essentially what we do is we combine the technology aspect with the human network. So the human network is our surveyors, it's our panel of respondents that allows us to be both offline and online. And then the tech aspect of it, how it helps us optimize internally. So you reduce the cost because now you don't have to be paying flight tickets to be able to go to places. You can actually handle everything remotely. Yeah. And then now what we're doing is now, after we figured that part, which is kind of like the basics, is now the next level of it is, okay, how can we use now research to be able to optimize in terms of speed? So which is why now we're trying to work on an AI moderator to help people to be able to do qualitative research at a bigger scale, also at a lesser cost. And now how can we now fix also the problem of speed in terms of you getting the data, where getting data in Africa still takes a lot of time. It takes weeks to collect data. Now, how can we now develop instant market data so that people can have access to the data? So when the client now comes and be like, I need data yesterday, then the data is already here that they can use, to kind of be able to do research the proper way, which takes a lot of time. But now that we have pretty much the tech infrastructure and the research infrastructure to be able to do that, is now the next level that we're taking on the product side.
Okay. Yeah. Serene, can you talk a little bit about your learnings around, the similarities, differences? I guess, the being a more of a product UX research business, I get quite a lot of tech overlap anyway, I imagine. But you tell me your story.
Yeah, I think for me it's a story of tension, I'd say. So like it's a big tension which is quite underrated, but actually impacts a lot of how things go. So essentially, when we had started out, we were like, okay, we're a tech company, but in reality, it wasn't a tech company. It was a tech-enabled company, which was doing an agency work with just the help of tech to optimize things. And at some point, you realize there's like a limit of like how much you can scale. Like the true story is we went to a point where we burnt out and we had to take a 1 month break because we were taking on a big amount of projects, but still doing the agency things. And then we're like, okay, we can scale this. And then we realized, okay, you cannot scale this. So it's really a big mindset shift, which is kind of, I think, one of the advantages because, like Karin was saying, like you really understand as a researcher what the work is to do. But then also, if you're going to really try to build a product, you really have to understand, okay, we want to bring this to a certain scale. So you have to be able, okay, how can I streamline these operations to the point where we can go from like 10 to 1,000? But also at the same time, how far can you go without really breaking the authenticity of trying to do research? Which for us was like the biggest battle, I think, around like for like 2-3 years when we were building out stuff. So essentially, what we were trying to fight against was the fact of like copy pasting the same model. Okay, we're gonna build an app, we're gonna get 1 million users, they're gonna be answering surveys, doing all of that, and we're gonna get the real insights. Which in reality, if you take the African market, people are still offline mostly. The average African consumer is not always found online. So for us, it was like, okay, we need to be able to scale still while being able to get the average consumer, which I think the good progression for us was like going from tech enabled to now like being very much more product led. But I think the biggest difference for us is like at some point we had to, and which is kind of like because of other different circumstances, but have to decide, okay, we're going to work towards being a product led company, which means that we're going to have to narrow down like 80% of the work that we used to do. We went from doing desk research, doing big reports, doing all of like the service things. And at some point we're like, hey, we're going to focus on operations. Operations is going to be our niche. And we're just going to work on that and make sure that we can productize all the different components of it over time as we learn with the different markets. And so for us, it was really like that tension that happened for a long time where we're like battling between, okay, now we still have to do the things the right way, but we also do want to become tech people. So like, even like from like personnel to leadership of how like you really decide to how you want to go about things to even how you think about developing the solutions was, I think, one of like the biggest things that was important in our journey, and is where you have like that really tension between like going from like agency to like product. Yeah. And I think Tova kind of like I had also some of the similar experience. So yeah, but I think it's good because it keeps you to the point where you're not just going to build a product just to build a product, which is what outsiders usually do. They're like, okay, I can just optimize this thing to the fullest. Where no, yes, you still try to keep the certain authenticity of research, which what makes research. But then yeah, but it's really like this really big battle that you go on throughout the whole journey. And then but once you get to that point of clarity, then I think then you really have something good with it.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, that tension between, you want some of the historical skill set and attitude in the research in order to inform the product, but you don't want too much of it because it dilutes your ability to be a product business. At the same time, it's a differentiator for companies coming from outside against the entrance. So Serene, maybe can you talk to us a little bit about some of the lessons that that you feel you've learned in going through this process?
Yeah, I think in terms of lessons, first one, I think working in the emerging market, one thing that we've learned is that one, you need to be patient when you're building tech, because as opposed to a developed market where you kind of can get a sense of like where the gaps are and try to fill it in directly. For us, it's really like a learning process. Like it's a lot of testing, it's a lot of failing, and it's a lot of having fun, like Karin said. Like we have, at the beginning, I think we were too focused on like finding the right solution right away. And then we realized that don't try to put too much resources at the beginning. Like test it out, see how the market receives it, see how users are giving feedback, and then from then build progressively the technology that once you have a better idea of the market, then you can really get to it. So for us, it was like, okay, you have to make sure that you really just, you take the researcher's approach, which is great when you're doing research projects. It's a lot more difficult when you're actually trying to build your own product because, you're very impatient, like trying to ship out features as quickly as possible. And then I think the other thing which was very important in terms of lessons was just a different way of how you think of research when it comes to building a product. Like when you're used to doing a lot of like research projects and just like doing like the traditional methods, when you really think of like, okay, how can we make this as a product? It really requires a different set of like thinking of how to go about it. There's, okay, this is how we normally do it, but now how can we make it more where you can streamline it where other people can use it at the same time? And it requires like switching between the brains of, okay, this is what I know from the research aspect. Now when you look at the tech aspect, there's like a limitation to it. Of course, you can't do everything that you want to do, so you really have to learn like, okay, what do I prioritize out of all of these beautiful things that we love doing? What are like the most important things I need to take out of it, and also what is feasible within what I want to do? I would love to create beautiful products that do everything, but at the end of the day, you have to know how to prioritize. Okay, this is the most important part of the quant research that we really want to extract from it and then build a product around it, and not just necessarily, okay, I just want to do everything, it's so cool, let's just make a product out of everything. And then once you launch it, you realize that people don't really want to use it because it's either too complex, because you've gotten too much into your researcher's brain. But yeah. So that's like for us, like the most important lessons.
Saying no, saying the stuff that you decide not to do sounds like an important decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Serene, what do you say? What do you say is the biggest mistake and the best lesson learned?
I'll try to be quick. So in terms of the biggest mistake, is there's something that costs more than building product is trying to unbuild the product and then building it again. So don't assume you know researchers and how they act. You actually have to do the actual research work, even if you're building products for researchers.
Yeah.
I think that's for us. And then the biggest learning, which I got from a non-research person that actually changed the way we thought about things, is that stop being a purist. At the end of the day, people still want to make money. And for us, it was pretty much, how do you sell research as a product, and how do you, from a general scheme of things, sell research more as an infrastructure more than a service? Because, and I think we've seen it as the years gone by, at least on our ends, that research budgets have gone down quite significantly across different countries, especially when you're in times of economic crisis. And at that point, people need to understand how research is actually going to help them and really be part of their internal processes. And it's at that point where you will be able to sell it to people who are non-research people, but also research people at the same time. So, yeah,
that's a great piece of advice that I think extends beyond just research and technology. I think a lot of people in the research industry should have that that lesson that stop being such a purist and appreciate people who want to make money. So